Hello everybody, it's the Downbelow RPG developers. I'm Ian.
I'm Steve.
And the role-playing game we're making, in case you haven't watched any of our previous episodes,
And there's some of you who haven't, I'm sure.
is about a utopian dystopia. It looks very utopian on the surface, and to most people it's pretty okay. But the characters we're focusing on have fallen through the cracks and see how the system is fundamentally broken.
Now, it's been a while since we actually talked about that. We're not going to talk about that this week, but we are going to talk about some concepts that are going to wrap up our previous series very nicely. And then we'll get back into talking about some story things. And for a change, I'm actually going to make this guy talk about some story things too. So I know, because I've been doing my share of talking about mechanics.
So, today we are talking about zoom levels. We alluded to this at the beginning of our series on combat, but this actually sort of segs us from purely talking about how to do combat action scenes in this game into a concept that, while it's extremely important for combat, and we're going to start with some examples of physical combat using it, we're going to move into examples of how to apply it to a bunch of situations as we talk about it, because the granularity with which you apply the system can change from moment to moment in the session depending on what part of the story you're telling.
Yeah. So, to put it up front, Zoom itself is not actually a purely mechanical thing. You're not going to look at a published adventure and say, this is a Zoom 5 scene.
Not really.
This is a shorthand we're using to describe the concept, which can basically be summed up as, what's the most dramatic way that a moment-by-moment scene is going to go? Would this be one of those sweeping scenes where, in the blink of an eye, lots of stuff is happening? If you've seen the recent Avengers Civil War, this is a fairly zoomed-out fight scene, because what's much more important than the individual maneuvers and the individual positioning is what's going on with each group of fighting heroes at any given moment. In the airport scene specifically, that's the one I was talking about. I should have led with that. This is zoomed out. In any scene, the importance is not who is throwing the punch, how is Hawkeye defending against. The important thing is, oh my gosh, Hawkeye is a trained martial artist and is holding off both Black Widow and, for a time, Iron Man. Whereas later on in that same movie, towards the end, we get this very, very zoomed-in scene involving Winter Soldier, Iron Man, and Captain America, where move by move actually does matter. So it's actually an excellent way to describe alternatives. Really, in a narrow zoom moment, each success will represent a single action. Chances are you will not be spending multiple successes at once. In a zoomed out moment, each success will actually represent the outcome of an exchange, and possibly a very large exchange, and it may be permissible or beneficial to spend multiple successes at once to get the desired outcome.
Such as in the... Now, restarting that sentence. Another way to look at it is, instead of thinking of a camera zooming in and out, you can think of how fast is time passing. Each success or failure can, in this analogy, represent a second, a minute, an hour, depending on how much action is going to be accomplished with that use of the trait, or that failure to use a trait.
So, we've talked about it. Let's give some examples, because talking about an idea and not actually showing how it works, that's not very helpful now, is it?
So, let's look at an example of very zoomed in short time scale.
Right.
You are fighting one-on-one with the mob boss, who is a Russian leg breaker by trade, and you've found out that this was the person behind all of your troubles recently. He's the one who broke your friend's kneecaps. He's the one who made you lose all your money.
He burned your house, he shot your dog, he ate your casserole.
So, this is a really important fight where pretty much every successful or failed punch or kick or infliction of a piece of damage on the opponent or on yourself is going to be one success or failure, and so the stakes are not going to be I take him out with one success. The stakes are going to be I gain an advantage with a success by wounding his leg or something, and if you need to take a failure to recharge one of your combat things, then the stakes would be you take a disadvantage where it'll be that much harder to win the fight.
As a further qualifier, the reason this scene is happening in our hypothetical is because not only is it a very dramatic scene, it's happening at this level of zoomed-in time, because the player involved really likes the dramatic back-and-forth combat. He really likes close-in John Woo cinematography. He really likes being there in the moment where each decision matters. For a player who did not like that, for a player who wants to know the outcome instead of work for the outcome, a level of zoom back is probably better, where perhaps each moment is actually several seconds of fight time, several blows exchanged, and it's not advantage versus advantage, it's pushing the enemy inexorably towards their ultimate demise.
And if you take this one level back, you might still have the same number of successes and failures go on, but treat them, as we alluded to, in groups. So instead of going back and forth and describing every piece of the exchange, you describe to the player, all right, if you use this and that trait, then you can achieve this over him, and if you have something else, then you might be able to go the step further and beat him.
So,
I don't have that right now. Well, if you take this wound that will hurt you later, then you can have that extra trait you need to take him out.
So, we've been talking vaguely about that. We are a little over our time for today. What say we come back in the next one with some very specific examples of a fight scene zoomed in. We'll skip all the setup, we'll just get to giving you a back and forth.
Fall between the cracks with us again, and we'll bring you the fight.